What happens when Ukraine's elite forces meet North Korea's so-called soldiers on the battlefield? Spoiler alert, it's not even close. Vladimir Putin thought he'd found the perfect reinforcements in Kim Jong-un's troops, a fresh wave of 12,000 fighters sent to Kursk to help Russia turn the tide. But Ukraine had other plans. Armed with cutting-edge Western equipment, including the unstoppable M1 Abrams tanks, Ukraine is sending a clear message. It doesn't matter how many soldiers Putin borrows from his friends, they'll still be smoked. From drones to artillery to tanks, Ukraine has been tearing through the North Koreans, and the M1 Abrams is leading the charge. With its thick armor, unmatched firepower, and battlefield versatility, this American behemoth is proving to be an absolute nightmare for Kim's troops. In one jaw-dropping engagement, the Abrams single-handedly annihilated a North Korean bunker in Kursk, showcasing exactly why it's one of the most feared tanks in the world. So how is Ukraine using the Abrams to dominate the battlefield? What makes this tank a game-changer against Russia's North Korean allies? And what does this mean for the war in Kursk? Let's dive into the action, starting with the tank that's rewriting the rules of engagement. On December 20th, Forbes' military reporter David Axe was among the first to suggest that Ukraine had started to deploy the M1 Abrams tanks in Kursk. It's been rapidly running out of these tanks. Of the 31 that the US sent as part of a $400 million aid package on January 23rd, coupled with 49 more that have arrived from the US and Australia since, Ukraine only has a handful left, claims Axe. Most of the remaining tanks are stationed with Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade, which is stationed in Kursk and playing its part in defending against Putin's counteroffensive in the Russian Oblast. According to Axe, the M1 Abrams is going to go out fighting. Ukraine apparently only has around 12 of the tanks left, with the country praising what it has due to the tank's thick armor and solid fire controls. As Ukrainian war correspondent Andrei Saplienko puts it, they are performing quite well across the limited engagements they've experienced in Kursk. At the time of Axe writing his article for Forbes, it was difficult to determine if Ukraine's M1 Abrams had actually been involved in any fighting with North Korea. The tankers are not 100% sure whether the North Koreans were among the enemy units they destroyed, Saplienko notes about one engagement. The machine gun cannot see the enemy's face, he chillingly added. Perhaps it can't. But around a week later, footage emerged of a fight between a Ukrainian M1 Abrams and a pocket of North Korean soldiers that eliminated all doubt. The tank is absolutely being used to dominate on the battlefield against ill-prepared North Koreans, and if Ukraine continues to be smart about how it deploys its M1 Abrams, it may be able to use its remaining stockpiles to do some serious damage to the thousands of North Koreans that Putin has received from his ally, President Kim Jong-un. So what happened? It all started with a rare moment of success for the North Korean soldiers Putin has deployed in Kursk. Somehow, a small group of North Korean special forces, likely members of the Storm Corps, who specialize in infiltrating behind enemy lines, managed to gain control of a Ukrainian position. There, the North Korean team fortified themselves as well as they could with the limited weaponry they had on hand. It's likely the soldiers only had rifles and grenades, meaning no anti-tank equipment was available to them in the newly taken position. However, the North Korean team had managed to build some trenches, which it hoped would give it cover against drones and any heavy equipment Ukraine might deploy. The trenches didn't work. After receiving news about the North Korean team's actions, Ukraine dispatched one of its M1 Abrams tanks to the position. Footage captured from the battlefield shows the tank hurtling across a snow-covered landscape, easily moving at speed even with the wintry conditions under its treads. Rapidly, it draws up to the North Korean team's trenches, moving into the range of a bunker in which the special forces were holed up. First-person footage captured by the tank reveals what happens next. With its crosshairs squared on the bunker, the tank began firing from extremely close range. The North Korean soldiers didn't have a chance. With no anti-tank weapons in their bunker, all they could do was stand by as the Abrams fired on their position. In no time at all, the American tank had completely smoked the bunker, destroying the only defensive position North Korean forces had managed to capture after nearly 2 months in Kursk. Unfortunately for Ukraine, there was a problem. Though it had successfully destroyed the North Korean bunker, it hadn't killed all of the Special Forces soldiers who used it for protection. One of those soldiers apparently radioed back to Russian command, informing them of the presence of the Abrams tank. As the tank hurtled back toward the safety of the Ukrainian line, it was confronted by a Russian first-person view or FPV drone that uses fiber optic cables to deliver real-time video footage of what it sees. The first of these drones wasn't able to do much against the powerful M1 Abrams, but Russia knew this would be the case. The first FPV drone discerned the tank's location before Russia started sending several in to tackle Ukraine's heavy machinery. Upon surrounding the tank, the FPV drones targeted the base of the Abrams turret, which is the least armored portion of the tank. The goal was to create an explosion that would consume the tank's crew in a fire from which there could be no escape. It didn't work. The Ukrainian crew managed to evacuate the tank and escape on foot, with the drones being too occupied with destroying the Abrams to stop them from getting back to safety. Unfortunately for Ukraine, the tank had no chance of surviving Russia's FPV drone assault after that. It was left abandoned on a road, where it remained for a week. It's unknown if the tank made it back into Ukrainian hands, but that seems unlikely. As much of an asset as the Abrams proved to be when fighting against the North Koreans, it was also a clear target once it was abandoned. Any attempt to return might have exposed the Ukrainian troops to FPV drones lying in wait. The tank was sacrificed. But it had already achieved its objective of decimating the North Korean position. That engagement gave us the first evidence of what Ukraine can do with its M1 Abrams tanks when faced off against North Koreans in Kursk. Now we're left with another question. Just what else could Ukraine use its American-made Abrams tanks for? To answer that, we first need to get a little better acquainted with the M1 Abrams. Specifically, the majority of the M1 Abrams in Ukraine's arsenal are of the M1A1 variant. Though older than the M1A2s that supplanted and improved upon the design, the M1A1 is still a very capable main battle tank. The United States introduced the tank in 1985, making it more modern than the majority of tanks Ukraine would have had in its arsenal when Putin launched his special military operation back in February 2022. It also had enough value for the US to continue production through to the end of 1992, even as the M1A2 was being rolled out, leading to America having an inventory of around 4,400 of these powerful tanks. About 400 of them are still being used by the US Marine Corps, with many also having been refurbished since the 1990s. The M1A1 is also popular with other nations' militaries. Australia has bought 59 from the US, with Egypt now having over 1,000 of these powerful tanks. Ukraine had a little over 80. Now its M1A1 stockpile barely amounts to a dozen. But it's a dozen that it's clearly putting to good use against North Korea. The M1A1 is a main battle tank that sports an AGT 1500 turbine engine, capable of generating up to 1500 brake horsepower. That horsepower also makes the tank surprisingly speedy, despite its 136,686 pound weight. As we see in the footage of the tank hurtling toward the North Korean position in Kursk, the M1A1 is capable of traveling up to 30 miles per hour across country. That speed bumps up to 42 miles per hour when the tank is able to stay on well-maintained roads. Then there's the tank's weaponry. A 120mm M256 smoothbore gun, developed by Germany's Rheinmetall, is the tank's main weapon, and it's extremely versatile. Army recognition says this gun can fire a variety of rounds, each of which serves a specific purpose when engaging North Korean soldiers. The M829A1 APF SDST rounds that can be loaded into the gun are kinetic energy rounds made using depleted uranium and capable of traveling at speeds of up to 3,523 miles per hour, or about Mach 4.5. Those rounds are effective at ranges of up to about 11,400 feet, though they've been shown to be capable of traveling around 13,000 feet in the past. There are also the M829A2 APF SDST rounds to consider. Introduced in 1994, these rounds also use depleted uranium, only they offer greater armor penetration than the previous generation. Whichever round Ukraine gets its hands on, it has some major firepower with the M1A1. The tank is also capable of storing up to 40 of Ukraine's chosen 120mm rounds, with 34 being in the turret bustle and a further 6 in the rear hull box. Complementing the 120mm cannon is a 7.62mm coaxial machine gun. Mounted on the tank's right side, with a similar gun in position on the left, this weapon can cover 265 degrees of the battlefield and shreds anybody who comes within its sights. The tank's commander isn't left out of the weapons front either. They have access to a Browning M2H2 12.7mm machine gun that can traverse through 360 degrees of rotation. Aimable from inside the M1A1's turret, the gun has an electric power traverse and adds even more to the infantry shredding power of the tank's dual 7.62mm machine guns. In short, the M1A1 is a terrifying prospect for any North Korean who is unfortunate enough to end up in its sights. The tank is also capable of mounting a solid defense against most of the weapons that Putin's North Korean forces might be able to use against it. In addition to an engine-operated smoke-laying system, the M1A1 has 6 smoke grenades that it can discharge whenever the crew needs to obscure its position. Armor-wise, both the tank's hull and turret feature UK-made Cobham armor that lends protection against small arms fire and minor explosions. It's also tough enough to stand up against some anti-tank guided weapons, though more modern weapons with penetrative abilities can still pierce the tank. That Cobham armor is worth a little more exploration. It's a composite armor that combines ceramic with various other materials of differing hardness that are layered together to offer a solid defense against heat and shocks. Multiple hit kinetic rounds typically bounce off this armor, as does chemical energy ammunition. More resistance against kinetic rounds comes in the form of a depleted uranium plate mounted on the tank. It's all very impressive stuff. And as we've already seen, the M1A1 has proven itself to be especially effective when taking out North Korean fortifications. even those that are surrounded by trenches. The long range of the tank's main cannon plays a huge role in that effectiveness, with its rapid-firing secondary guns also being useful against any North Korean infantry that come within range. And it's here that we start to see just how the M1A1 can continue to be effective for Ukraine in its battle with Putin's North Korean soldiers. You may remember that we mentioned earlier that Putin has taken to sending these troops to attack Ukrainian positions on foot. That may seem strange if you've heard of North Korean soldiers raving about the superior treatment they receive from their new Russian masters. In some respects, this better treatment does appear to be happening. The North Koreans are being provided with Russian military uniforms and equipment that are far superior to anything they've used in North Korea. They've even been receiving Russian military documents, perhaps giving these soldiers the false hope that they may be able to set up homes in Russia once the war is over. The North Koreans are staying in better accommodation and even enjoying superior meals than they would typically receive back home. These reports suggest that Putin has laid out the welcome wagon for the 12,000 soldiers he's received from President Kim. But appearances can be deceiving. For as well treated as these North Korean soldiers may be when they arrive in Russia, nothing prepares them for how Putin uses them on the Kursk battlefield. Russia is ruthless in its treatment of its North Korean allies. The soldiers are sent to the front lines to be used as little more than cannon fodder for Ukraine's drones, artillery, and tanks. They're distractions, sentient pieces of meat that Putin uses to soak up as much Ukrainian ammunition as possible before he sends in his favored and more competent Russian soldiers to attack the Ukrainian positions. North Korea's soldiers aren't given any of the equipment they actually need to succeed in their efforts to break down Ukraine's fortifications. We saw that in the encounter a small group of the country's special forces had with Ukraine's M1 Abrams tank. Even though those forces managed to secure and fortify a bunker, they had none of the explosive weaponry they needed to defend against a tank. No anti-tank missiles, no mines, nothing that could stop the Abrams from hurtling toward the bunker and destroying it once it came into range. That's a story that's repeating again and again as we learn more about how Putin is using Kim's soldiers. Most are sent into battle on foot with no armored vehicles, and only the most basic of small arms with which to defend themselves. They're also being sent to batter themselves against Ukraine's defenses en masse. According to the National Security Council for the White House spokesman John Kirby, the North Koreans are conducting massed dismounted assaults against Ukrainian positions in Kursk, in what Kirby describes as human wave tactics. These tactics aren't new to the Ukraine war. Putin has long relied on his manpower advantage to absorb Ukrainian ammunition to the point where his soldiers can overrun fortifications. It's those very tactics that resulted in around 1,000 North Korean casualties in the space of a single week, claims Kirby. And it's also those human wave assaults that open the door for Ukraine to make even more use of its stock of M1 Abrams tanks. Think about it like this. We've established that the North Korean forces are being sent into battle with little more than small arms and a couple of grenades that won't do much against the Abrams armor. They're also being sent to assault Ukrainian positions on foot with no mechanized support and a complete lack of drones or any other weapons that they could use to take out the tank. Some of the North Koreans aren't especially well equipped by their Russian suitors either. Many have brought along their North Korean rifles, which have top-loading magazines that are considered to be extremely inconvenient, meaning that even their small arms aren't especially useful against Ukraine. Right now, Russia is using these human wave assaults to divert Ukrainian weaponry. Ukraine typically uses FPV drones to tackle the waves of North Koreans because it knows Russia's imported soldiers have no real strategy for dealing with them. Those unmanned aerial vehicles often carry grenades to drop on the amassed North Korean soldiers, causing explosive casualties in the process. But what if Ukraine used its M1A1 tank for that purpose? Ukraine could keep its tanks behind their lines until the North Koreans attack, deploying them when the first human waves come to wreak havoc on potentially hundreds of troops. The tactic might only work for the first couple of waves. Russia would likely send in drones to attack the tank once it knows they're on the battlefield. But Ukraine at least has options for how it'll use its M1A1s. That approach would add to its already established tactic of sending the tanks in to take out North Korean fortifications. Plus, it comes with the benefit of being able to withdraw the tanks before Russia sends in its own drones. It's a possible approach. And it's one that overcomes the disadvantages that deploying the M1 Abrams on the front lines previously created. The Russian drone threat has already led Ukraine to pulling these tanks from the front lines as of April 2024. So worried is it that the drones will destroy the tanks, using them to tackle human waves with explosive firepower before they withdraw to relative safety could allow Ukraine to take better advantage of the full destructive force of its Abrams. After all, on-foot North Korean soldiers armed with rifles and grenades can't do much against a tank loaded with a 120mm cannon and a terrifying set of machine guns. Ukraine has also been making modifications to its M1 Abrams tanks to improve their survivability on the battlefield. That, combined with the blowout panels fitted to the top of the tank's turret and the separation of ammo from the crew bay, would give those manning the tank a chance to survive even if the Abrams is disabled. Reinforce those turret defenses with cope cages that can absorb some of the impact of drone-delivered explosives, and you get a tank that's becoming much more usable, at least against North Korean soldiers in Kursk. There's only one more question to answer. How will Russia respond to Ukraine's M1 Abrams smoking the North Koreans in the Kursk bunker and its potential deployment against its ill-equipped human waves? More fiber-optic drones are a likely solution. It was these drones that disabled the Abrams tank Ukraine used to take out the North Korean bunker in the first place, so Russia knows that they're effective. Those drones are immune to most electronic warfare tactics, meaning Ukraine can do little more than try to shoot them out of the sky. An Abrams with a cope cage might be able to survive a strike or two, but if Russia starts deploying these types of drones en masse, Ukraine might find itself limited in how it can deploy its M1 Abrams against North Korea once more. Russia's other response will be the same as every other response it gives to losing soldiers against Ukraine: throw more people into Putin's meat grinder. The Lowy Institute reports that Western intelligence suggests that North Korea is preparing to start rotating its troops in Russia. Exactly what this means is yet to be seen, though it would be reasonable to assume that North Korea will send a fresh batch of 12,000 soldiers into Kursk every couple of months, while withdrawing the battered remnants of the previous rotation. Taken over a year, that would mean Russia gets its hands on 72,000 soldiers, albeit not concurrently, that it can throw at Ukraine's defenses in Putin's beloved human wave attacks. The strategy would go some way toward addressing Russia's 500,000 shortfall of soldiers, while Putin desperately tries to avoid a second round of mobilization in his own country. It would also play out well for Kim Jong-un. The more soldiers he sends to Russia, the deeper in debt Putin will be to him. Kim could leverage that debt to gain more military secrets and money from Russia. The Lowy Institute also speculates that Kim might use these rotations to deepen his ties with Russia in preparation for the end of the Ukraine war and the potential reintroduction of his country into the global geopolitical sphere. For Ukraine, more North Koreans would mean more work for its M1 Abrams tanks. These American-made weapons have already proven effective against North Korea's poorly equipped forces, and they'll continue to be, so long as Ukraine can limit the effects of Russia's drone attacks. But what do you think about what Ukraine achieved with its M1 Abrams tanks against North Korea's bunkered-down soldiers? Is this a sign of what's to come for the rest of North Korea's troops? Will Kim send more soldiers to be fed into Putin's meat grinder? Share your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching the video.